What is more triggering and harder to talk about in intimacy, which will lead to marriage? Mm-hmm. Is it around money or how to raise kids? Or are they kind of equal in their triggering?
No, I'd actually say that this is such a great question. I'd actually say that more of our trauma, because this is what's interesting, right? The honest answer is it depends on what your trauma is, but most people's trauma comes out more strongly in how to raise kids, because now it goes back to how they were raised
and what they
how
got,
they
what
felt.
they didn't get, how you were treated. And
Exactly. So I'd say that raising kids becomes a really tension-filled point for couples, because both either think the way they were raised was great, or both had bad experiences and now they're repeating them with the kids, or a mix of both. And so I find that kids are also triggering, because now you're getting to see who they love and who they respond to, who they listen to, who they like, who they connect with. Now, of course, kids don't have favorites, especially when they're young, they don't even know. But there definitely is that feeling from an insecure parent that, oh, I do this all for them and they just want to hang out with you, or you get the fun side of the kids and I have to deal with the stress. And I'm not saying none of that's true. I'm just saying that I think raising kids triggers the most amount of trauma. So, and I've seen that. It's natural, because you're now looking at that kid with the lens of, what did I not get at that age? And I want to give it to these kids. And even though that's a beautiful intention, it may not be ideal, because you may overcompensate, you may struggle. And what I've realized generally is that with any of this, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to get things wrong. But I think with our kids, we want to be perfect, and we want to get it perfect because we love them and we don't want to mess something up. And often it's that recognizing that loving them is more important than perfecting everything around them. And I feel that way with my parents. Like, I feel my mom loved me so deeply and truly that despite all the imperfection of my upbringing, her love is what lives inside of me. And that is something that no one's ever going to forget. Whereas sometimes you can set up the perfect environment around the kids, but if you don't fuel it with love, if you don't fill it with the oxygen of love, they're not going to grow up with that or remember that.
It's interesting. I heard I'm pretty sure it was Wendy Suzuki on the podcast. She said that, her parents never really said they loved her, right? And it was very hard to have that conversation. She said she wanted to tell her dad, and she wanted to have that conversation and start talking about it more, and just say, hey, I know we don't do this as family, but I want to say I love you.
Yeah.
And if I get it back, it'd be great. But, you could set your kids up with like giving them the best coaches and teachers and training and schooling to want them to be successful. But I think what I took from her was like, she just wanted to hear that she was loved.
Yeah.
Not, yes, set up the perfect environment for me to flourish. That's great. But as kids, like you said, we want to be heard, seen, and accepted, which essentially allows us to feel loved. And I think when we can learn to do that, which is hard if we never got that ourselves. So it's hard to unlearn it and do the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But if we can do that in our intimacy, in our relationships, and with our family, it will help us feel a deeper sense of peace and love, which is what we're always looking for.
Absolutely, man. Well said. Well said. That's beautiful. That sounds like a great interview too.
I'm curious about, I'm always a guinea pig on this show. I'm always like, revealing stuff and opening up about stuff and sharing, this is how I made a mistake and this is what I'm learning.
Yeah.
As your friend, I'm curious, and you can be as honest as you want to be. What feedback would you give on love for me that, and you don't have to build me up or anything, but what feedback, real feedback, honest feedback that you've seen, and I know you talk to me all this time about this, that you see as possible for me to step into that maybe I'm doing but need to do more of, or that I'm struggling with, that you see from a perspective you haven't told me yet? What is that feedback you would give me so that I can be vulnerable and work on it in this process?
So I'm going to build you up because it's true, and I have to. I have to because it's true. Like, I don't think I've seen many people do the amount of self-work you've done over the last few years, the amount of energy, time, money you've invested in working on yourself. It's unbelievable.
Thanks, man.
And you're seeing the results because of it, right? Like that's the most beautiful part, that you've always worked on yourself, so that's not new, but I know that love has been like a real investment and healing for you.
Yes.
And I just don't ever want anyone to think that, oh, because you have a good podcast and because you write amazing books, shout out to the Greatness Mindset, like, you know, like just because you're doing that stuff, that's not why you have love. Like you don't have a good relationship because you're Lewis Howes. Does that make sense? Like, I think often externally it could look like, yeah, Lewis is good looking and he played sport and he's an athlete and he did this and he did that. And that's why it's like, well, that's not what's made you a good partner, or that's not what's made you a healthy partner. It's the work you're doing behind the scenes that you obviously share on the show, but the work that I get to see you do as a friend. So I do want to say that because I think it's important to notice and acknowledge that.
Thank you.
But if I had to give any feedback or thoughts, let me think where I want to go with it.
And also, like, you know, knowing, you know, taking the relationship to the next steps and what you know being married and what that looks like and what I'm going to be preparing for in the future and how to make sure what to look out for myself, that it could be a trouble for me or something.
I do think I start the book with this beautiful conversation between a student and the Buddha. And the student asks, what's the difference between I like you and I love you? And the Buddha replies, when you like a flower, you simply pluck it. But when you love a flower, you water it daily. And so my honest advice, and this isn't just for you, it's truly advice for all of us, including me sitting right in front of you, giving all of this advice, is, are you watering your relationship daily? Are you checking the soil? Are you giving it sunlight? Are you aware? I think so many of us get a beautiful tree, a beautiful plant in our lives, and then you think it's just going to survive. And so all the work that you've done now, even though it's tiring, exhausting, and transformative, that never stops. And I see that in my life today. I've been with Radhi for 10 years, and I would say that we still have to water the relationship, check the soil, check the sunlight. And I don't think that it ever changes. The stuff you're checking changes, but the checking process doesn't change.
So you can't just set it and forget it.
You can't, that's exactly it.
You can't do a lot of work in the first couple of years and then say, I can ride this for 20.
That's exactly the problem. I think we think that 2 years of work results in 20 years of fruit. And it doesn't. It doesn't. Like if you look at the harvest, if you look at the seasons, it's a yearly thing. It's an annual thing that happens. And so I really, really feel that. And I would often also say that, you know, look using the garden analogy, like look out for the weeds and make sure you're constantly planting new good seeds. I think we also think we've thought about all the good seeds. We don't need any more. We don't need to think about anything new. And we keep trying to recreate our first date, or we live in the same way, or the way we had it was amazing. And we keep celebrating how it is, rather than recreating what it needs to be. And so I think that's really important. But that's not just about you, it's more of a warning to myself, to you, to everyone, because I think amazing relationships can go stale really quickly.
Yes.
Because we become complacent.
That's true.
And complacency, it's always like, we always hear that phrase, curiosity killed the cat. And I'm like, complacency did. Now, if you're curious with your partner,
you'll keep growing.
You'll keep it growing. And so
true,
use curiosity.
I love that. Okay, I think I have 2 final questions.
Yeah.
Before I get to them, I want people to get the book, 8 Rules of Love, how to find it, how to keep it, how to let it go. Make sure you get a copy. Get a copy for your friend, your partner, your family who's struggling in relationships, or people that want to just keep them growing by being more curious. We'll have it all linked up in the show notes on YouTube, on audio. So again, make sure you guys get this. Follow Jay's podcast and subscribe there. We do a lot of fun stuff together over there, so make sure to check that out as well. Your first book as well is amazing, so make sure you guys get Think Like a Monk. His book is sold, I think, 2 million copies now?
Yeah,
or
2.5 now.
2.5 million copies. Make sure to get that, again, On Purpose. One of the top podcasts in the world. And if you want a great speaker at your event, make sure to hire Jay. He's one of the best speakers out there. So again, get the book, subscribe, do all those things. 2 final questions. I've asked you questions about your 3 truths before,
Yeah.
so I'm not going to ask that. I've asked you about your definition of greatness, and people can go back and listen to those episodes if they want to. This is a question, because you have a prompt in here about writing a love letter to yourself. So if you had to give a love letter or a love audio note to your younger self, the part of yourself, the time when you felt the most shame. You don't have to say what was happening, but the time when you felt the most shame. What would that audio note be to younger Jay of that season of life? A love letter to him.
Don't try to fall in love like they do in the movies. Don't try and fall in love like they do in the songs. Don't try to fall in love in some big romantic Hollywood idyllic way. Ask yourself, do you know who you are? Do you know who they are? Every time you ask yourself, do they like me? Ask yourself, do I really like them? Every time you ask yourself, do they think I'm attractive? Ask yourself, am I working on myself? Every time you think, do they want me? Will they take care of me? Ask yourself, how can I better take care of myself? And so everything you want from someone else, give it to yourself first. And that's what I'd say.
Yeah, that's a good love letter. It's a good love note. Okay, final question. So imagine, this goes back to our Matthew McConaughey scenario.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine your 90-year-old self
Yeah.
giving a love letter or a love note to your current self. What would your 90-year-old self say to current Jay to support you for the next season of love after 10 years of being in a relationship and I think 7 years of marriage? What would you say for the next 10, 20, 30 years?
After it's all said and done, the love you have for humanity and the love you have to serve and to use your purpose in helping other people, that's the only thing that will stand the test of time. And that your life will be measured not by awards or trophies or numbers, but by how deeply you helped people love themselves. And I think that's a really interesting nuance that we're often focused on how much we love people, but if you really love someone, you can make them fall in love with themselves. And so I would measure myself not by how much I loved, but by how much I was able to help people love themselves. Because that would be proof that I really love them. I'm gonna make my partner aware of what I'm healing because I'm not fully healed.
Yes.
And now that they're aware and I'm working on it, we can also work on it together. So I think we've also had this unhealthy idea of conscious love being, you're fully healed, and then you come, it's like, that's not true. It's a journey. And so, but the thing about the journey is, are you working on yourself?